Future Fit Company, der Podcast für die neue Arbeitswelt.
Methoden, Modelle und Mindset für Innovation, Agilität und New Work. Ganz pragmatisch und frei von Ideologie.
In this English-speaking interview, I talked to Ben Kao, one of the founders of Taiwan Home Nursing, a joint venture company with the known Dutch home care organization Buurtzorg. And we talk about how it all started and how they at Taiwan Home Nursing adapt the Dutch self-organization model to the circumstances, to the context here in Taiwan. We speak about cultural elements to make this work or to make it more difficult, and we also get a better understanding of the market for home care here in Taiwan and what that will mean for society and organizations that want to tap into that potential. I wish you an interesting 1 hour with my fascinating conversation with Ben Kao. Welcome everybody to a new episode of the Future Fit Company podcast. Again, this time with me, Florian, and again this time, as you can hear already, in English, in contrast to most of the episodes that are in German. I'm here today because my interview partner is Ben Kao here in Taiwan, and Ben is one of the co-founders of Taiwan Home Nursing, which is a joint venture company of Buurtzorg, the known Dutch home care company. And I had the pleasure of knowing Ben already for over a year now. We also had the opportunity to do a bit of work together, and I thought it would be a very interesting conversation today to have with Ben to talk a bit about Taiwan Home Nursing, about their self-organization model they're applying and what is specific about those things in Taiwan. So Ben, first of all, welcome.
Thank you, Florian. It's so nice to be here.
Yes, thank you so much, Ben, for being here. Also today, which is actually the first episode that we will record in person. So that means both of us were sitting in the same room here in our co-office here in Taipei. Most of the other episodes before we did virtually because people were sitting in Germany,
sure.
Me sitting here. I had some partner was sitting in Suzhou, so we all did it virtually. Ben, maybe because most of the listeners, or let's say it differently, some of the listeners, they might know or might have heard about Buurtzorg. I'm quite sure because most of our regular listeners will be German speakers. They most likely will not have heard about Taiwan Home Nursing. So maybe just for the beginning, could you tell us a bit about yourself, and also how you arrived where you are today as one of the co-founders of Taiwan Home Nursing?
Okay, sure. Hi. So my dear friends in Germany and online, probably all over the world. My name is Ben Kao. I'm a locally educated medical doctor who went to the United States for my graduate school studies in healthcare administration and long-term care. The reason I went abroad was because Taiwan is facing an aging trend. Actually, if you look at the numbers, Taiwan has the lowest birth rate in the world.
Consistently, right? For many years.
Yeah, we don't like that number one, but we turn out to be number one that way. And same as the percentages of families with one person, partly because of the high divorce rate, and many other reasons. So Taiwan, inevitably, we see a trend. A very rapidly aging trend. And because of that, after I finished my studies in the United States, I would say it's a calling from hometown. First of all, my parents still live in Taiwan, and I'm the only child in my family. So for the Chinese culture, Taiwanese culture, there's a calling that I want to be close to them. And also, because of the aging trend, there are more job opportunities in this field for elder care, long-term care, and even some geriatric medicine job opportunities. Even though I don't practice medicine, that's another interesting story. For myself, I'm atypical in some way that I decided not to practice medicine. Instead, I use the healthcare, public health approach to design and also operate a model. And using this model, I serve the elderly people. Unlike the medical doctors treating individual patients. And that makes me happy. That's why I travel abroad and return home and devoted into this field. And how I started 7 years ago in Taiwan was I was first invited by my previous medical school, Taipei Medical University, to come back and be a designer, a special project manager to demonstrate how medicine, especially some professionals in medical field, can collaborate with the long-term care people who are mostly outside hospitals. But they also are very critical because after the patients discharge from the hospital and going home, they need care. And for some elderly people who got fragile, older, weaker, even they may not have some serious illness, but they stay at home and they need care. So that's why I started with helping the family medicine doctor and some GPs, general practitioner doctors, to collaborate with nurses and to help people, mostly older people, outside hospital.
Now, when you came back to Taiwan from the US, I'm not sure, I assume you did not come back already knowing that you would co-found an organization called Taiwan Home Nursing. So how did that happen?
Interestingly, I started working for big healthcare system, big hospitals with very complicated hierarchical structure. So hierarchy. I experienced hierarchy the first day I came home because I was introduced to family doctor director, nurse director, and after a period of time when we came up with something, we have to propose and get approval from the superior of that medical system. And then, of course, as you know, it's not just one tier. It could be multiple tiers.
Yes. And we will talk about that even in more detail a bit later, like how hierarchy is even different in Taiwan than, for example, hierarchy potentially in the US or potentially in Europe. Okay, but how did you get up to Taiwan Home Nursing?
Yes. And at that period of time, my duty was to look at the existing hospital organized home nursing duties, because there are some nurses at hospitals in Taiwan whose duties are providing care at homes, although that's a relatively small team within the hospital. But that's why I started to study in order to make the service more efficient and more with right temperature. That's our term, you know. Because for elderly care, it's not just high tech, it's high touch. So, but I experienced that, it belongs to a big organization, and I observed some limitations. That's why at that time, meanwhile, I also, because of my expertise in home care and home nursing, I pay attention to that Buurtzorg model from Netherlands, which was introduced to Taiwan around 2015. It was the right time I returned from US back to Taiwan. And when I first heard about it, it touched my heart because basically we had shared a very similar belief of using technology. When I say technology, not just technology for technology, it's a technology for service. So I propose that a good tool, a good platform of technology can help the professionals to save time and provide better communication and better care. And meanwhile, that was technology, right? Another part of the service is people. Another focus was, are these people who are working in home care, are they happy or not? So when I returned from US to Taiwan, I observed that not many nurses were happy because of the job they were doing. They spent too much time doing some paperwork and they could not focus and focus on or devote enough time in the real patient care, their main duty.
Seems to be a very much the same situation, but in a slightly different context to how actually Buurtzorg in the Netherlands started out, right? Knowing that Joost de Blok was also very frustrated in the way he worked there, and you had a similar experience in Taiwan, maybe with a different context, but similar description.
Exactly. So as you just observed, it's so similar that I immediately got attracted to their model and got contact with some nursing coaches
from
Buurtzorg. And so there was a chemistry. There was chemistry. They feel that their concerns were understood by not all the people in Taiwan, by some people who were a little bit frustrated. And let me share with you this term, frustration. Because after I developed some interest in Buurtzorg model, Buurtzorg invited me to visit the Netherlands for 1 week visit to be with the team, with the management office, to experience, because they expect me to be an international partner at that time. And one of the nurses told me that this self-organization method is a revolution. Because it's a revolution in Netherlands in home care field. Because before Buurtzorg was founded in 2007, the Netherlands long-term care, home care was moving towards another direction. And many nurses feel unhappy and they feel frustrated. So as you just told, as we just shared, that frustration was the key. If everybody is contented, happy with what it is now and did not have not really utopia, but with they have some unrealized dreams or goals. And these people in Buurtzorg and some people, including myself in Taiwan, we happen to be those frustrated people.
And frustration can sometimes be a very good trigger for change, right? To initiate change. And if people see themselves in a position, and I think that's very much also a personal perception of ownership, right? But if people feel themselves in a position to say, I don't accept this and I want to make it different, right? And then I think you're then one of the people who said, I don't want to accept this for Taiwan, right? And you've seen the opportunity. And as far as I understood, so then you co-founded Taiwan Home Nursing with 2 other founders and actually a third person, if I'm informed correctly, like Stefan, the person we got to know each other.
Stefan is the 4th co-founder.
Yes, the 4th co-founder from
Buurtzorg.
Buurtzorg.
3 local co-founders and 1 Buurtzorg co-founder. So 4 of us.
Yeah. So Stefan is basically taking care of Buurtzorg in Asia Pacific and China specifically, and he introduced us, right,
Yes.
to each other, and so he's the fourth co-founder. That's why Taiwan Home Nursing is like a Buurtzorg joint venture, right?
Yes, because this Buurtzorg organization started in just providing services in the Netherlands, and later on they spread the model to some neighboring European countries, including Germany.
Yes.
And these days in UK, and of course in Denmark and many other countries. And meanwhile, there some countries in Asia pay attention to this model. That's why this Stefan Dijkhoff, was a chairman of Buurtzorg Asia. And many Asian countries' Buurtzorg teams were formed under this Buurtzorg Asia framework. And so, interestingly, many international teams, including Buurtzorg in Japan and myself, we have visited each other and exchanges our views. And it's very interesting that we, in this Asian culture, we observe something similar and we face a very similar situations, including regarding adopting a new self-organization approach.
Now, let's dive a bit into this, but maybe before that, because I'm not sure if all of the listeners are actually familiar with the Buurtzorg model, how they practice it in the Netherlands, but basically my understanding is that it's basically very much, it's an organization that consists of hundreds of parallel self-organized nursing teams, small nursing teams, where basically the nursing teams are responsible for organizing their work and delivering their work in the way they see fit. And there is only a very small, we could call it a supporting back-end headquarter, back office that, so instead of having a leadership team that would tell them what to do, it's actually the other way around, that they would have a back office that would support a technical infrastructure for them to organize their communication, to stay in touch and to coordinate. And I think they would do some general like services around billing and financial stuff, but basically all the rest, administrative things, right? Administrative work. But then all the rest is basically self-organized parallel nursing teams that are encouraged to share and to cooperate, but basically they're in charge of their own team.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And interestingly, this revolution, allow me to put it this way again, started in 2007 in the Netherlands. They started with 4 nurses, and within 7 years, they've got more than 10,000 nurses, from 1 team to 1,000 teams. But the number, for many international and Dutch, industry providers, they envy them for just by looking at the numbers. Tremendous growth. But it's the right way to see it is to see why they grew so fast, why they attracted people. So let me put it in a few terms: happiness and simpleness. Simple is good. Is what the Buurtzorg founder Joost de Blok always says. Simple is good, and then they care about the happiness of the workers. And to extend from that, happiness doesn't only come from their salaries. Many other factors also contribute to happiness. So Buurtzorg, the core expertise of these nurses are providing nursing care. But what makes it different and special is the mindset of these workers and how they first got recruited and then retained it in this organization. So it was something in their mind, make them happy and satisfied. And
I think that's a very interesting fact to see that if the people providing care are satisfied and happy in their work, then the quality of the care will also increase, right? So that's one side effect that made them so successful, because I assume this, like we have that still, like in Germany, we also have that, like the centralized care systems. They were not like the caretaker or caregiver happiness or satisfaction is not a relevant design criteria for setting up those structures. That's not relevant at all, but it's about whatever they call efficiency and being able to control and track what happened, right? And now they basically turn it on its head and say, so first of all, it is important how the people who give the care feel. It's very important and will have a tremendous effect on the people who receive the care. And then I think the other part which made that so successful and why the centralized approach would basically fail is that my understanding, like elderly care is very much a system where it's very much context specific of what makes sense, and you need to adapt to what happens in the context where you are, right? And it does not help if you have centralized standard operating procedures if the context that you encounter is a very different one, right? And I think that's why that has been so successful, because it realizes that we need to adapt to whatever context we're facing, and measures might be very different from what some bureaucrat somewhere imagined what the standard operating procedure would be.
I totally agree with you. Mm-hmm. While you were talking, something just popped up into my mind, a term called the culture of being adaptable and flexible. Mm-hmm. Take Japan, for example, mm-hmm. the first Buurtzorg Asian country with a Buurtzorg team. They are known for their culture that led to their strength in manufacturing.
Mm-hmm. The Japanese in general.
Yes, mm-hmm. yes. And of course, not only in manufacturing, their service industries, mm-hmm. although very subtle and very advanced mm-hmm. In certain fields. But when it comes to work, that the wholeness is focused. The wholeness means that this wholeness means that it's very comprehensive. Mm-hmm. You don't just workers should have that flexibilities to use their expertise, react to what's mm-hmm. happening, and very often in the elder care field is very individualized. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very individual, and this nurse has to have the ability to make changes if needed. Mm-hmm. Whatever is good and right for the client. And when I say client, this is another cultural term that in medicine and long-term care, we sometimes say patient. Mm-hmm. But when we use client, especially the Buurtzorg insists in that way, mm-hmm. it means a different mindset.
Not patient, but client.
Yeah, so these professionals also look at this as not only a professional service provision, but also it's a service, mm-hmm. Customer service experience mm-hmm. thing. And that requires some flexibility given to these workers mm-hmm. by trusting their expertise. Mm-hmm. So back to your question before I forget. Mm-hmm. So we Taiwanese at that time observed this trend, and it all sounds very appealing. And it makes sense. But in 10 seconds, we Taiwanese co-founders at that time, before we co-founded, we asked ourselves, but is it possible in Taiwan?
Why did you ask yourself that question?
Because based on what we were trained in Taiwan and what we see around us, and especially in this field with nurses, and believe me, medicine and nurses and nursing field is one of the difficult fields for getting rid of hierarchical relationships.
Okay.
Because I think in many countries, medical doctors and nurses, this hierarchy
very strong hierarchy system, yeah.
plays, and it happened to play very well in the past mm-hmm. because it's accumulation of experiences, of evidence mm-hmm. of medical or long-term care practices. Mm-hmm. You follow the guidelines. Yes. Yeah, so you don't have to be creative.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in this aging society, when elder care, it's not medicine, it's not medical care. long-term care, the care here means support. You have the physical health related support and the life support and mental, social support. So it is not typical. It requires different skill set. So having said that, the three co-founders in Taiwan at that time, together we discussed with Stefan, the fourth co-founder. By the way, he happens to be German.
Yes.
But he spent so much time in Asia.
Right.
He knew the language. He experienced all this Asian culture thing. So we persuaded and discussed with Stefan. Say, hey, we appreciate the essence, the key spirits, principles of the Buurtzorg practice. But in order to make it work in Taiwan, do you allow us to modify to what's culturally appropriate, culturally possible practice model in Taiwan? And of course, you say yes, and that's the first click that we say, okay, it seems that this European entity is very open to trust local, international partners to practice their model. But as we always can imagine, when we carry the term Buurtzorg, which characterize itself with self-organizations practice, that there are certain principles that we should do. Let me briefly share with you what they are. First, it has to be bottom up, and then there has got to be empowerment and trust, and of course, this trust and empowerment also comes with the responsibilities. Yeah, so the workers who enter such organization has to understand and be mentally ready that they are trusted, but meaning that they have to make judgments and they have to be responsible for that.
So they cannot wait for somebody else to make a decision for them, but they have to make the decisions themselves.
Yes, but to be honest, in the beginning in Taiwan, when we practiced that model, we faced some situations. There was a few months of Kaya, even though we don't totally adopt the Dutch model, it's already modified to the Taiwanese culture, but there were still some chaotic situations that the employees, our workers, nurses and caretakers, they say, it takes us extra time to think and discuss, and make decisions, and we are not used to that. Why don't you just tell us what to do? But I would say, when that situation happened, it's a test for this organization, how much change they have to do to make, how much compromise, if there's any compromise. And of course, there was some compromise. We compromised in some principles. For example, in the Buurtzorg practice in the Netherlands, in each team, they were very against the rule of manager, because the manager could, undermine the whole self-organization practice in some way. But in Taiwanese culture, based on the culture of following the authority, and also the law. This is what I have to mention. The long-term care law in Taiwan requires our teams to have a supervisor.
Okay, that's a legal requirement.
It's a legal requirement. Okay, but what we did was we tried to share some of keep the supervisor rule as legally required, but to train the team members to share and even operate some tasks required by the supervisors.
So it's a bit like actually what we at creaffective, we are like an 8-person team, and in Germany, for example, there is a law as well, a legal requirement that each limited company needs to have a responsible person that is responsible and accountable by law, right? So you need to have somebody who is a general manager. That's a legal requirement. And very similar, what we did is, so to the outside world, we have that. So we appointed somebody who is general manager, which now happens to be my colleague Daniel. But from in the inside, the way we organize, you don't see that, and there is no general manager. But basically what we did is we kind of analyzed, so what is it that normally people would expect a supervisor or manager to do, and then we kind of split that up into, or we transformed that into processes that would happen in the team, or we would just split that into separate parts that different people would take care of, right? So we officially fulfill the legal requirement. Yes. There's a general manager, but in the inside it's actually very different. Is that similar to what you're trying to do? Okay.
Yes, and actually let me share with you a very recent update of what we've been doing here in Taiwan. It's the third year after the Taiwan Home Nursing was established. Mm-hmm. In the first few years, we tried to stabilize and keep the business, mm-hmm. and gradually infuse the Buurtzorg principles, mm-hmm. of sales management, mm-hmm. and also neighborhood care, mm-hmm. and the task we design. And in the Netherlands, echoing what you mentioned, they have a very good example. In their nursing team in the Netherlands, they have 7 rules. Mm-hmm. In each team, there are around 12 persons, nurses, and they share 7 different rules, and they rotate.
Okay, like role rotation.
They rotate. Mm-hmm. So that was very appealing to us, and it has several advantages, mm-hmm. of doing that. I clearly remember one of the Dutch nursing coach shared with me, when you rotate a role, number one, when everybody can do different roles, this team can go on without 1 or 2 team members disappearing. If they have to take leave, mm-hmm. or they change jobs,
it doesn't disrupt the whole thing. It
doesn't disrupt, because everybody has
mm-hmm.
has known certain ways to, mm-hmm. do different rules.
So you multi-skill people in the team.
Yes, that's mm-hmm. number 1. Mm-hmm. Number 2, how Buurtzorg grew from few teams to that many teams is that when they can transplant their experiences very rapidly. Mm-hmm. So when I'm a medical doctor, I used cell division,
yes.
as an example. With cell division, then when the cell is divided into both, they both carry mm-hmm. certain key cellular elements, mm-hmm. or organelle in the medical language. Mm-hmm. So in this way, when a new team is built, mm-hmm. if they move, they assigned it a few existing members to a new team, they can immediately help mm-hmm. some newcomers, mm-hmm. So some old employees together with new employees, they can make the new teams operate very rapidly. Mm-hmm. And number 3 is that empathy. Mm-hmm. By rotating the rules, the nurses will have empathy. Mm-hmm. For example, in this self-organization design, everybody make decisions together, and everybody should follow their decisions. Based on what? Based on that they were all involved mm-hmm. in this, and also based on they understood that nothing is easy. Mm-hmm. Each decision is difficult. When a nurse rotates, for example, rotated to a role in charge of education, mm-hmm. and if the other nurses, they have different opinion, they will discuss and they will come up with a decision. But in this process, this nurse who was playing as the organizer of the education task, it was the most difficult for her because she has to coordinate and help the team come up. So this nurse would understand how difficult it is. So next time, when the other person becomes the education director, education
role, takes over the education role.
Supposedly, the other team members will have that deja vu experience of, 2 months ago. When I understand it's never an easy decision. So for me to be part of this discussion, I think they would think differently and reach their empathy will play some role. So I like that one. So this year, we started to have some international online education sessions with the nursing coaches from the Netherlands. And the next session we will discuss will be how we can operate the 7 rules in a self-organized team. And that's a very practical approach.
Yes. How can, I'd be very interested because you said, okay, we adopt or we borrow from the Dutch Buurtzorg model, but we have to make adaptations to the local context here, to the local culture also here in Taiwan. Are there other things that you can share, like what adaptations did you make to better fit with the situation here in Taiwan? Like you mentioned already that here this concept of hierarchy and expectations towards having a manager is a bit different maybe from what they would be in the Netherlands, like especially like on this concept of what we would call power distance. Like the Dutch are a very low power distance country, whereas Taiwan is a very high power distance country, meaning everybody is actually accepting or comfortable with certain people making decisions and other people receiving the orders, right? And that does affect, I would assume that does affect how things are done here. So I'd be very curious to hear a bit more, like what adaptations did you make to make this model work well in your context here in Taiwan?
Okay, yeah. First, we in our internal educational sessions, we repeatedly mentioned and remind our workers that the self-organization is the direction we're moving towards. But we keep reminding each other that it's not going to happen overnight. So we were ready for some adaptation and also some frustration during the trial. So we mentioned clearly that there could be some trials, and if it's not working, we will revise.
So it's a very smart way of framing the whole thing as an experiment, right? That could also not work, but it's not a big deal. If it doesn't, then we just do something different.
Yes. It's not going to destroy our organization if one day we found that self-organization. If we unfortunately figure out that self-organization doesn't work that wonder. Okay, but of course, so it's also culturally related because in the Asian culture, Chinese, Taiwanese culture, we sometimes try to mention the worst case scenario to make the workers feel safe. Say, okay, it's not a big deal, but number 2, we try to remind them this corporation was set up to lead innovations. Not just to make us feel good, but to be more sustainable. Because Taiwan home care industry is blooming, is growing so fast. Let me give you a number. The number of organizations grew twice within last year, but the big pie is still there. So, meaning that there are more smaller organizations coming out from bigger organizations. So the number, and the workers of each team in average became smaller. There are more small teams. Okay, so competition is very keen. So we do this because we want to do this experiment to make you, we told our workers exactly, make you happy. But please tell us if you really feel happy when we do this. That's why the 3 co-founders last year, the end of last year, November, December of 2020, we visited all our teams one by one in the evenings in their special session to once again tell them what our culture is. But how do you feel about it? Say something bravely. In our organizational culture, we encourage disagreement. And
which is very atypical of what often happens in Taiwan, right?
Yes. So we did a survey. We first gave them a survey. What made you decide to stay in this company and work for us? There are 15 choices. 1/3 of them are salary and benefits related. And then the other 1/3 are just personal relationship related. And the other 1/3 was, you feel that how different is this? And how different the culture means to you? And does it make you feel happy and satisfied and feel that sense of accomplishment? And interestingly, of course, I will be lying if I say money is not number one factor. Money is number one. But very surprisingly, it's just 50% of the people rank number one when it comes to salaries and benefits. The other 40% told us that they stayed. The top reason was they like the culture. They like what we say we're moving towards and what we have practiced. So numbers talk. Yeah, and it's true. And we're not the best paying home care organization in this field. But many organizations outside, they were curious how we grew so fast from 30 staff to 300 within 3 years.
So we could say that the compensation is like a bit like a hygienic factor, so it needs to be there and people should not be dissatisfied with it, but then it's not the main criteria for people to deciding to stay. But then I think other things will come into place, right? And then I think your unique way of doing things is then a strong reason why people are attracted to you, and also a strong retention element, right? That people choose to stay. At least, like our own experience in self-organization, we had colleagues in our team that say, well, because we're a small company as well, they would say, well, I did get offers to go to other companies and salary would be considerably higher, but they would say, I cannot imagine anyone going back to a classical hierarchical system. I just could not see myself working in such an environment anymore. I could imagine that once people working for you are used to the way and appreciate the way things are done, it will be very hard to imagine going back to as you described it, like a very hierarchical medical system, going somewhere else.
Yes. And another important factor to promote this direction is also the culturally related, that here in Taiwan, the different way is in the Netherlands, when the nurses are self-organized, they know how to finish their work efficiently. So their time management, the way they attribute the time, is quite different from the way here in Taiwan. For example, they don't have to meet each other that often in their office because it's home care. They either are traveling between families or providing care in the families. And they have good IT tablets and good, very powerful system that
It's a good IT
allows them to
infrastructure.
communicate.
Okay.
So, and to not only communicate in the care, they also discuss and understand what other teams are doing, so that all the information is transparent
In an IT infrastructure.
in an IT infrastructure. That's also another reason that it makes it easier for their task to work that way, remotely, efficiently, but also not losing their feeling of connection. But culturally in Taiwan, in our culture, we like face-to-face encounters.
That's why we're sitting here, right, in this room.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, although I could also have a very nice interview with you online, I believe, but that's why in our team offices we have kitchens. We encourage workers to come back between services to have a cup of tea and coffee, or even have lunch together.
So this is really not an IT problem, but it's a cultural reason why that happens. So it's not that you're unable to come up with a similar IT system than Buurtzorg, Netherlands. Yes. But there's a cultural reason of why you don't want it. Could you say it this way?
Yes and no. IT system is a wonderful tool to facilitate communications in a professional way in our field. The service record of the clients, but also in the Dutch system, their IT system with the vehicles as tablets allow them to learn from each other, share experiences of care, especially under COVID-19.
Yeah.
Last month, we had an international session with a nursing coach, sharing the COVID-19 service experiences. And Buurtzorg was leading the Netherlands in this field. The nurses still provide services even in a more comprehensive way for those confirmed individuals at home. And they use their IT system to encourage each other to share their experiences of special care under COVID-19. And because of the COVID-19, the workers meet each other even less. So the IT system played an even important role. So they were doing things wonderfully with the help originally with their culture and the IT system. So Taiwan, in another way, in Taiwan Home Nursing, we also did the similar things. It's a wonderful thing to have an international partner that a year ago, Dutch nursing coaches share with me how they adapt to this COVID-19 situation. So at that time, as you know, you're in Taiwan, we are so lucky in some way that we have so few cases. But we are also unlucky in another way that I, as a long-term care provider, a medical care provider, that we're not so ready for that big scale of pandemic situation. So we were not prepared for that. So that's why we had this exchanges online. And Taiwan was pretty inspired by what they did in the Netherlands. And we follow a similar way by having the meetings and have the teams, self-organized teams, react more proactively. Another example from what I heard from the nursing coach, they said in the Netherlands, when this pandemic started to happen, even the nurses face uncertainties and anxiety. So one of the senior nursing coaches even tried to persuade the founder, Mr. Jos de Blok, that can we compromise a little bit by just say something, a centralized approach because it's a very special situation that although we allow the local self-organized teams to react their own way and then share experiences and make the whole Buurtzorg Netherlands stronger, but can we do a little bit centralized?
Okay.
This special, but Joost de Blok said no. So another key reason to me, if this approach can last or consist, is the leaders' determination. That's why in Taiwan Home Nursing, the 3 co-founders, we may be very different. We may be different in certain things, but in terms of the big picture of practicing self-organization, we also are very stubborn in that way, which we believe is important.
I'm already aware a bit. As I said, I told you in the beginning, time will pass very quickly, and it does. Maybe I have a last question I'd be interested in hearing. So you said we are very stubborn in a positive sense in our belief in strengthening self-organization in Taiwan Home Nursing. What are some changes that you foresee, like some things that you think this would be like a next step of our evolution that you would like to trigger in your organization? Are there things that you feel like this is where we are getting now, and I hope that we can develop in the future in terms of how you organize yourself?
Sure. There are 2, we say, CSR, corporate social responsibilities for Taiwan Home Nursing. One is to meet the needs. Let me put it this way. Very interestingly, our business is solving social problems. It's our core business to provide care. But providing care itself and relieving the family's caregiver burden and attracting more people to become workers for long-term care, it's our responsibility. And also something very critical to the existence of our company. Because most long-term care companies, home care organizations are competing over workers.
The shortage of caregivers.
Yes, because they are not very happy. They don't really recognize their social stereotypes for the work they've been doing. So Taiwan Home Nursing is aimed to attract more people and retain people here. And that's why we want to lead the innovations of doing something different in order to attract more talented people in this to work for long-term care. Because Taiwan, compared to many countries, in our universities or technical colleges, we have many programs for elder care. But the percentage of the graduates working for the field is very low, sometimes less than 10%. That's why we said, why? Because in surveys and studies, they're not happy of their future work.
Is it also because of the status that this profession has in society here, that it's not a very well respected profession? So I see, like, maybe a lot of the listeners might not be aware of this, but like you see a lot that Taiwan and more wealthy Taiwanese families have migrant workers from Philippines, most likely, mostly Philippines and also Indonesia, right?
Yes.
Because Taiwanese won't do that work, right? So they import migrant work. There are even broker agencies, right? That would I use the term very deliberately, import those people from abroad to work as home care or just caregivers or just kind of servants in those families, right?
Yeah. Let me give you a number. 60% of the elderly who needs home care, 60% of them are cared by families. 30% are cared by migrant workers who enter your home and live with you 24 hours. It's just literally part of the family.
Yeah.
and only 10% are cared by long-term care workers.
Like Buurtzorg.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In Taiwan,
Mm-hmm.
in that 10%, only 6% are cared at nursing homes or
Mm-hmm.
residential homes.
Mm-hmm.
That leaves only 4% living at home cared by home care nurses
Right.
and home care workers.
So it gives us a sense of how big that market
How
still
big
is.
that market is, and why is that way? It also contribute related in our culture. Family members are expected to
Take care.
Yeah.
Do you already see, because you mentioned that it's actually a very competitive landscape in that home care business, called this way. Do you already see other companies looking towards your organizational model, in the sense of, is that they see this could be a differentiator that gives them a competitive edge and they're trying to mimic or adopt that?
From my observation, not yet.
Okay.
Maybe in the future they will be, because they have, so far when they look at the accomplishment, or they always see us as a successful entity, growing 10 times in workers' number. But they, only when they sit down and talk to us for like more than 30 minutes and learn about what
they realize
our self-organization thing. Because on many occasions when I give speeches to talk about our model, I always mention this self-organization, but I will look at the expressions of the audience. They would first say, so nice, they like it. But in a few seconds, any questions? Some of them would ask questions, but does it work for our organization structures? Because not all the other organizations are structured that way. In terms of size, of course, like what you say, your team is small, but you still practice that. But for Buurtzorg, it is a huge organization, but you practice self-organization. So, regardless, not everyone is ready and would like that. So
that would be my final question, because that's an impression that I sometimes get here. We talked about this extensively, like when I'm here in Taiwan and trying to. I truly believe that in the future this having more decentralized decision-making authority and self-organization is a way to deal with the world we're living in. But my impression sometimes is that for a lot of people that are currently in a decision-making position, it's actually not an attractive thing to do, because it affects their power and status, and therefore just is something they're not striving to go for.
Yes.
And is that something that plays in there as well? So you give those speeches and people say, oh yeah, kind of nice, but not really for us.
But that's part of it. But the other part of the audience was saying, it's really nice, but I don't know how to do it, because it's sad. We don't have that organizational structure or condition, resources
to do so,
to move towards that way. So my conclusion is that yes, I'm not sure about other countries in the world, but in Taiwan, at least for those who practice self-organizations, we are just practicing it, and we're documenting it, and hopefully publish this in a few years, because only when the sweetness, the good sweet results are shared, then probably more people would believe in it and feel a little bit safe, saying, there's an example, successful example. But here in Taiwan, we just don't have that that many, or even a few examples yet.
That's also something I realized, that a lot of companies, I would describe it here as very conservative, and a lot of companies would want so-called best practice examples or just cases from other organizations before they would be willing to try. So I think in that sense, as I said before, Taiwan Home Nursing is just very pioneering. because you're like the first here to do that, and you could only have examples maybe from abroad, but not from inside Taiwan.
Yeah, and believe it or not, in Taiwan there are many successful big manufacturing enterprises.
Mm-hmm.
They're practicing the opposite way, and
Exactly.
they're also very successful.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's
that I believe you've been to Taiwan for quite some time, and you might agree with me.
Yeah. That would lead us to a second podcast maybe at some point. But I talk to sometimes European counterparts when it comes to introducing. So a lot of practices of self-organizations, they do make cultural assumptions of how things work, and I would always say you do see a number of companies that are agile in the sense of being able to adapt to changing circumstances, but not using any of those known practices for agility that you see in Europe, because they do have a lot of cultural assumptions that just don't work here. And so they do it in a very different way. And as you said, they're very successful, but they're actually the opposite of the direction you're going into.
Yes. Yeah. Probably time is almost up, but
yes.
Let me give you this example again. As I first put it, the Buurtzorg, I call it a movement.
Mm-hmm.
It's a practice, but it's also it's actually a mindset. Paradigm shift. I also even call it that way in our field. So the nurses told me everything started with unhappy, unsatisfied nurses. When I first heard that, after I heard that, I talked to nurses in Taiwan around me. I figured out, there are also some unhappiness. But you know what? Many nurses did not know they were unhappy until they heard about the situation from another region of the world. And then it suddenly woke them up, saying, that's right. We were not happy. We used to feel something's wrong, but we didn't know
how to pinpoint
what was wrong.
Yeah.
And until somebody reminded me, asked this question, are you really unhappy? Do you have unrealized dreams, unrealized goals? And then they suddenly, they nod like crazy. And then they got very hot-blooded and get involved in this discussion. So I would always say, sometimes it's not that people don't understand, but they were not used to this. They have to hear more stories. And sometimes, this is my conclusion, crisis creates opportunities. The crisis of unhappy workers will lead to the shortage of workforce, and it's a crisis. And in Taiwan Home Nursing, why we decided to practice this? Because we see the shortage of workforces. So it's a strong enough reason for us to say we can just exist like everybody else, doing it our way. But if we want to make some changes and to be more successful, we may have to take a different approach, a new route. So because of crisis, we were urged to make changes.
Ben, thank you so much for your time and for your willingness to be here for this great conversation. I very much enjoyed it, and I'm sure it will be very interesting and provide a lot of value also to our listeners. We'll talk about this in a moment. We'll include ways of how people can reach out to you if they're interested and if they want to know more about Taiwan Home Nursing. We will put that into the show notes so that people can do more research if they're interested afterwards. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you very much, Florian. And thank you all, my friends online, for listening.